My disease probably started when I was about 2 weeks old, after I was born in 1962. My mom shared with me the story of how I got a 3-inch belly scar. Later, I learned that I had a pyloric stenosis. Now, 50 years later, I wondered, did the surgery back then change my gut microbiome? Did this pyloric stenosis cause my Crohn's disease? Or was the pyloric stenosis the beginning of my Crohn's disease? One day, science may have the answer. I was officially diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1984 when I arrived at the emergency room at Boston University Hospital, where my father and I both worked. I was told I was one of the first patients to receive bowel rest as a treatment option instead of surgery. I had lost 35 pounds. I had just graduated from college. I had worked as a nursing home administrator intern full-time. I took 4 night classes and I worked on the weekends at Yale New Haven Hospital. So by the time I got back to my parents' house when I graduated, I was not doing so well. And I asked my parents to take me to the emergency room, and they looked at it, the surgeon looked at it and said, you know something, we're going to try something new. We're going to set you up on IV nutrition, and we're going to keep you there to see if we can get rid of the inflammation. And sure enough, after 14 days, the inflammation was gone. Please know that in 1984, there was no MRIs, there was no CAT scans, there was no calprotectin test. I was diagnosed by ultrasound and by the touch of the doctor's hand. And when the surgeon looked at it, they got together and said, you know something, let's see if we can try something new. Instead of just cutting out his intestine, let's just see if we can rest his bowel for a little bit. And so that's how it all happened. And so I learned from that point on that diet and food had something to do with it if I was not allowed to eat. But I was given TPN, or total parental nutrition, to keep my body going there. So growing up with the GI issues with no one to turn to, I always felt alone. I learned to be a great actor by not showing my weaknesses or vulnerabilities to anyone, whether it was my employer for fear of termination, whether it was my friends or family. I was always afraid of rejection. I discovered later in life I learned these traits from my parents, as they are one of my biggest mentors in life. Unfortunately, I had to go through many years to discover that my acting skills were so good that no one ever knew that I had Crohn's or colitis. But I did live with it, and I lived in silence, and I didn't share it with anyone. I didn't want to be fired. I was already denied employment from the US Navy. I was already denied employment from the US Post Office. I had gone through 2 marriages that ended up in divorce because my partner couldn't handle my Crohn's disease. So I always went and played actor. No one ever knew. It wasn't until my first surgery in late 2003, 23 years after being diagnosed, did anyone in my family know how truly sick I could become. In 1995, I was very fortunate to meet the one and only Elaine Gottschall while she was on her book tour promoting Breaking the Vicious Cycle. She was straightforward, charismatic, caring mom who spoke as if the specific carbohydrate was simply basic science that was easy to understand. You put garbage in, you get garbage out. The basic science she shared was eating healthy, easily digestible monosaccharide foods will most likely reduce the bacterial overgrowth in the GI tract that is known to cause inflammation. After reading the science of the specific carbohydrate diet, I committed myself fanatically. By that time, I was so sick with a bladder to ileum fistula, I had no other choice. I started the next week. I did very well. I got a little bit complacent. I decided to add in rice or sweet potato or oatmeal. And what that did was it increased my glucose levels. And what that did was it activated my sugar addiction all over again. And so I started that vicious cycle of breaking the vicious cycle. And then it dawned on me, that's why Elaine named the book Breaking the Vicious Cycle. You got to break the cycle of feeding the bacteria that leads to the inflammation. In the last 23 years, I've documented through my medical record that 18 years was asymptomatic or in clinical remission without any medication. I decided I would play trial and error on myself than relying 100% on the doctors practicing medicine on me. For when I was admitted into the hospital in 1984, I turned to the doctor and I said, well, you diagnosed me with Crohn's disease, get rid of it. And he said, Jeffrey, let me tell you something. 85% of all the diseases that we know, we can only treat by trial and error. We don't have any cures. We're just sitting there, we're practicing medicine, so we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we'll try this, and if it doesn't work, we'll try this. And I turned around and said, well, you know something? I learned that when I was in the bowel rest, what I put in my system is what's going to come out. And I kind of learned it through all this, and Elaine kind of put it all together for me. My personal journey has been challenging, especially after my mentor, Elaine, passed away in 2005. The most important steps to reaching my goal to beat the odds was to eliminate as much negativity and self-defeating behaviors and attitudes of myself and those around me. To the doctors who said the diet had nothing to do with it, to the family, friends, past lovers who used peer pressure to change my life course, I stood strong as I am today to proclaim, no one tells me what to do but me, for I am the captain of my ship, and I, and only I, will steer the ship in the direction I know that works for me, regardless of what others say. And to those people who did their best to destroy my goals, my self-esteem, my self-worth, and my outlook in life, you did not win. You made me stronger. I overcame much adversity in my life and was made stronger every time I heard the words, you're not good enough, you have Crohn's disease, you have a life of misery, medications, surgery. Not all doctors are bad. There's some really, really awesome doctors out there. But when you look for a doctor, I always say, look for a doctor that shares your philosophy, your outlook, your goals. And when I was a patient of Dr. Korsnick, I can tell you, the compassion and passion that came from him gave me chills. But the most important thing he said to me was, if SCD works for you, go for it. If it doesn't, come back. We'll talk about another way to help you reach a better quality of life. When he said to reach a better quality of life, I can tell you, I cried the whole way home. I finally found a doctor that said diet had something to do with it. And yet on top of that, he said, Jeffrey, we will do our best for you to reach your best quality of life. Not a doctor who said I was going to live misery and surgery and just, a life of sadness. He gave me hope. He gave me positivity. And I so appreciate that, Dr. Korsnick. Thank you so much. Now, how did I get here today? I had searched over 6 years while being on permanent disability, trying to find out what is my life purpose. I'm not strong enough to commit to a time clock job, but I loved helping people. Then one day, about 2.5 years ago, I went on Facebook looking for people on SCD. And when I didn't find what I was looking for, I started my own SCD community. I remembered Alan Key's quote, if you want it in your future, you have to invent it. And so I did. I wanted to pay it forward by helping just one person with my life experience following SCD for 23 years. I thought if I could help one person not go down the same path I did, I could make a difference in someone's life. When the community asked me to lead the way to create a meeting place for all of us, I thought long and hard about how does one take the virtual world to make a reality? How do you remove the computers of communication to be able to sit alongside someone in unity? It certainly doesn't come with any history, no past, no one's ever done this before. There's no step 1, step 2, step 3. But I was very fortunate to work with Sophia Hamrick and take the big picture and make it into a process that would appeal to the entire SCD community without creating any barriers to getting together. And so because of you, we are here today. You, the SCD community, inspired me to lead the way, to create a conference, to unite the community, to bring in physicians, clinicians to teach us, to bring the companies and organizations that support the community here today. And following in Elaine's footsteps, Sophia and I created the Specific Carbohydrate Diet Association as a non-for-profit organization to bring awareness to the general population and, more importantly, to the medical community to educate them that the specific carbohydrate diet works and should be the first treatment option for many people diagnosed with a disease that affects the GI tract. I've experienced and seen too often the medical community promoting pharmaceutical therapy and saying, sadly, diet has nothing to do with it. So many people suffer needlessly simply because the medical community are telling people diet has nothing to do with it. I gather they can continue to practice medicine instead of the obvious. What we consume has a direct effect on the body. I believe in the power of people can change the direction of the medical community as we come forward and show our numbers of successes of the specific carbohydrate diet. The first step was to give people the tools of other people's life experiences to be empowered about their direction of medical care, rather than the medical community directing them down the path of medications, surgeries, and saying the worst statement ever: your disease is horrible. It's the worst disease. You know, there were times I had to remind people, you know, there's Crohn's disease, colitis that I have. It's not a bad thing. I'm 56 years old. I'm standing here strong. You know, I think terminal cancer is the worst disease. I think when you get a sentence or a disease that says you have so much months or days to live, when I worked in hospice, you know, that was a lot worse than what I go through every day. Even with the 39 inches of intestine that they took out of me, I'm still much stronger than a terminally ill patient. So never ever tell me that I have a horrible disease. And I educate people every time that they say it. Positivity instead of the negativity goes a long way. We have a lot of work ahead, and your presence here today brings us one step closer to educating us and the medical community. We have 2 days planned, and we hope you enjoy your time here eating SCD food, uniting the fellow SCDers, and meeting the companies who we support and who support us. Being that this is our first conference, we know that we can improve in the next year's conference in 2019 and all those years that follow. Because today is a success, and for what we do today is what we build on for the future. And I can promise you that there will be future SCD conferences. We just don't know where they're going to be located yet. We haven't figured that out yet. But with the input from all of you, that is going to actually help us know where to go next for each year. This is not a one-time event. Your feedback will be greatly appreciated. And lastly, I hope everyone knows they're not alone here anymore. You know, there were many times in the Facebook community no one could see. But when I noticed that there were certain people that met each other for the first time online and shared things together, and there was the hearts and the loves and virtual hugs, I cried. I've cried at home. You know, when I see someone like Susan and Jennifer who live hundreds and hundreds of miles apart, thousands of miles, and yet they collaborate together, just as all of you. It is truly the most heartwarming experience, even though it's 6 degrees of separation. You have all reached out, you've all helped each other, and we're all here today because of you. Thank you so much. I finished.